All right. We finished the biology of the nervous system. We talked about the endocrine system. So the next chapter is the chapter that deals with sensation. Now this chapter will go a lot faster than the other chapters now because we're going to start picking up speed. And basically we have about 3 more weeks before the fall break. And after the fall break, the semester is just about over. And so it's a good thing that we're going to be picking up speed because I've got the minimum of 4 chapters to do in 3 weeks. But we can do it. I used to, well, I still love to write and publish my own psychology textbook. And one of the reasons is because I don't like the way most psychology textbooks are set up, but also I have certain ways that I would like to title chapters. And I would like to title a chapter on sensation, the chapter of miracles. And we are going to deal with the senses in this chapter. And the more that I study the brain and the more that I study the senses, the more that I am in awe of how they work. Now, let's say for a moment that you have a person driving down the highway, and let's say it's a lady, and a song comes on the radio, and she says, "That's our song." And she starts getting really warm and happy thoughts about this song that she shares with her loved one. Well, let's analyze what has just happened for a second. You have a guy that's in a building, that's in a booth, that's surrounded by electronic equipment. And he takes a piece of plastic and basically shoves it into a machine. That machine reads what's on that plastic and somehow converts that into a manner of communication that will go through wires and go through the machines and all this, and then finally somehow go to an antenna, and the antenna puts out radio waves, and she's driving along the interstate and her antenna captures one of those radio waves, and it just so happens to be on that frequency. And those radio waves somehow come down that antenna into her car. The radio wave goes in, and now it's going into all this machinery and such, and it starts being converted, and it's going down into wires and such, and somehow it comes out of the speakers, and her ears catch those sound waves, and they go from the air, caught by her ear, goes into the auditory canal. Down that auditory canal, it goes, it hits the eardrum. The eardrum starts vibrating. From there, it's going to go into the inner ear. The inner ear will take that information, that energy, and it's going to convert it to a language that the brain understands. The brain will take that and say, "That's our song." And then she will smile and have good thoughts and good memories. And this occurs basically in seconds. And to me, that is just, for a lack of a better word, that whole process is a miracle. Because how does something like that just happen? You know? Well, what we're talking about is you have a stimulus, and it goes down a pathway of one of the senses. That takes it to the brain processes it, and then something happens from there. Well, the process of converting this incoming energy into neural activity through these receptors, whether they be auditory receptors or visual receptors, the process of converting that incoming energy into neural activity through these receptors is called transduction. Now, another housekeeping term that I have to discuss with you is called adaptation. Now, we've got a nice little definition here. The process through which responsiveness to an unchanging stimulus decreases over time. Simplified definition, you get used to something. Now, I used to have a business. It was located in Pine Bluff. Every month I had to go check on this business, and this was before the interstate. And so as I was traveling to Pine Bluff about Whitehall or maybe a little past, it would become very, very apparent to me I was getting very close to Pine Bluff. Anybody got an idea what alerted me that I was getting close? The what? The paper mill, absolutely. That paper mill odor was overwhelming. And as soon as you got close to Pine Bluff, you were just overwhelmed with this odor of the paper mill. But you know, when I got to Pine Bluff, I didn't smell it. I don't think they closed the paper mill in my honor, so that while I was there, I wouldn't have to endure this. So, I submit for your consideration that my olfactory receptors, my sense of smell, was overwhelmed by these molecules being put out by the paper mill. I was overwhelmed and for a sustained amount of time, and I got used to it. And as a result, my receptors became non-responsive. So I didn't smell it anymore. Okay? Now, until this COVID thing hit, my husband and I basically never ate at home. The year before COVID hit, we ate at home a total of 5 times. 2 of those was a holiday, Christmas and Thanksgiving. Just don't have time to cook, don't have the energy to cook, and then our schedules and such, so we go out to eat almost every night. But I can tell you one time that you can always count on me cooking something, and that's when it snows. Because snow and chili go together. I mean, when you have chili and when you have snow, you gotta have 2 things. You gotta have hot chocolate, and you're gonna have to have some chili at some time for something to eat. I make a killer chili. I mean, it's almost like world-class worthy. It's, Chris and I have a rule. If you take a bite of chili and it doesn't break a sweat, it's not worth eating. So, when it starts snowing, I get all the ingredients out. And the first thing I do is I saute some onions, and then I use either ground round or ground sirloin. because I want to keep the grease minimal. And so I start browning that with the onions, put a little sugar in there, and some garlic, and I'm browning that, and put some V8, start moistening it a little bit, and then I'll put some regular tomato sauce and some other spices in it, and it's, you know, I'm stirring it, and I'm stirring it, and I taste it a little bit, and I stir it, and it's just about ready, but it hadn't got any jalapenos yet. Take those jalapenos, bam, and then I start stirring and simmering, and then I taste it. That's better. That's better. Not good enough. Bam! And I'm stirring, and I'm tasting. And I'm stirring, and I'm tasting, and it looks a little bit dry for chili. Why don't I put some jalapeno juice in it? I'm stirring, and I'm tasting, and I'm stirring, and I'm tasting. It's getting there, but it's not there yet. Probably need some more jalapeno. Well, I'm about ready to hit it again with some jalapeno, and Chris comes in, and he tastes it, and he said, it's pretty there. Yeah. I said, no, I can't taste the spice yet. I can't taste it. And he said, why don't you take it off the heat for a little while and let it mellow and then come back and taste it? Well, all right. I still think it needs some jalapeno. I leave it there for half an hour, maybe an hour, come back and I taste it and yep, it's there. Now, do you think that that chili really mellowed that much in a half an hour or an hour? I see some shaking of the heads. What do y'all think happened?
Your taste for it went away.
The what?
Your taste for it went away.
Adaptation of the taste buds. I got used to it. I got used to the spices. And so they became non-responsive because I was sitting there constantly tasting it to see if it was right yet. Therefore, I had an overwhelming amount of stimuli that in a short amount of time, and I got used to it. Well, this can happen with any of the senses. When you get from a bright day into a movie theater and you can't see anything when you walk in that room, and then you say, wait a minute, I can't see where I'm at, I'm not used to it yet. Wait a minute, I can't see yet, my eyes have not adapted. See, any of these senses can go through adaptation, okay? Well, what is sound? Basically, sound is just moving air, and it causes air molecules to vibrate. Moving air that causes air molecules to vibrate. Well, there are some terms that I need to go ahead and show you here. All right. Waveform is basically a graphic representation of sound. Basically how we do that is we have a line like that, and you'll see sound represented kind of like this. Now, amplitude is the distance from the baseline to the peak of the wave. Okay? So it is the distance from the baseline to the tip of the peak of the wave. It can also be down here as well. Now, wavelength is the distance of one peak of a wave to the next. Okay? Amplitude is the intensity. It is measured in decibels. Okay? It's the intensity of the sound. It's going to be measured in decibels. Wavelength, it's measured in what's called hertz. The normal range of hearing is from 20 to 20,000 hertz. 20 to 20,000 hertz. Now, frequency is the number of completed cycles that pass a given point each second. All right, loudness is determined by amplitude. Amplitude, loudness. It is described in decibels. The pitch is the high or the low of the sound. It depends on the frequency. The timbre is the purity of the sound, the quality of the sound. Okay. I am not a financial counselor. Haven't even ever taken a class in economics. My math is not all that great. But I can tell you one thing. If I were to be the recipient of some unexpected money, I think I'd probably invest in some laboratory that is doing work or experimentation in hearing amplification devices or deafness. Now, the reason I say that is because I truly believe within 10 years we're going to have multiple generations of people with hearing problems, hearing deficits, if not deafness. Now, when I was in college, it sounded like I was not being able to hear people. And when they talk, I couldn't understand a lot of what they were saying. And it got to me, and so I went to an ear doctor, and he said, well, what we need to do is, let's run you through some tests and see how your hearing is. He ran me through all kinds of tests. I mean, even, it was a battery of tests. And he called me into his office and he was kind of grinning. And he said, well, I have the results of your test. And I said, okay. And he said, first of all, you do not have a hearing problem. He said, in a way you do, but you don't. Okay? He said, we have tested your hearing, and honestly, your hearing is off the scale. You're one of 3% of the population that hears everything. And it is almost off the scale where we can't measure it. It's so good. And I said, really? And he said, yeah. He said, top 3%. And he said, the problem is, it's not that you're not hearing things. You're hearing everything, and it's coming in and overwhelming your sense of hearing and your brain processing. And so it's cluttering, and it sounds like everything's muddled, but the fact is, it's because you're hearing everything. And so you're going to have to learn how to focus on people. And when you are talking to them, you watch their face and you concentrate on what they are saying. And you learn how to filter out some of the extraneous stuff. I said, 3%. All right. I can learn how to filter. So I did that. And he was right. I mean, you know, I learned how to do that, and I got where I could really, really zero in on what people were saying. And students were amazed because they could whisper something in the back of the room, and I would comment on what they were saying. It was an awesome, awesome gift. Well, several years later, many years later, it seemed like I was having problems hearing again, but it was kind of different, but it wasn't, and it was kind of confusing. So I went back to the doctor and I told him what was going on. And he said, well, we've got a great baseline. Let's just see. He goes, it's been a long time. Let's just see how your hearing is and what's going on with you. Put me through all the tests that he put me in for, and then even more. And I went back into his office, and this time he wasn't smiling. And he says, you like to go to concerts, don't you? And I said, yeah, I mean, I'm cool. Oh, yeah. And he said, and you love to go to dance places, don't you? And you love to dance. And I said, you know, I've been known to boogie. And he said, you love to shoot guns. And I said, how do you know this? And he said, you told me. I said, we have not had this conversation. And he said, yes, we have. He said, here's your test from several years ago. Here's your test now. You look at them and you tell me what you see. And I said, well, looks like there's been some changes. He said, yeah. He said, you have gone from the top 3% to a moderate hearing loss. And he said, you've been doing all these things to assault your ears, and now you're starting to pay the price. And one thing I do like about COVID is when I don't understand the student, I can blame it on the mask right now. And nobody picks up on that. But the fact is that even without the masks, many times I have to go over and I said, I'm sorry, I don't understand what you say. And that's because I did not take care of my ears when I was your age. Now, there used to be a show when I was growing up called Lost in Space, and they had this robot that took care of the little boy, and whenever there was any kind of problems, he'd say, "Danger, danger, Will Robinson, danger." Well, that's why I came up with this particular topic, or title. I asked the doctor, what can I do to keep from going deaf? And so he told me that I had to learn how to protect my ears. Normal conversation is 60 decibels. Probably right now, if I were to put a decibel meter on it, I'd register probably between 60, well, right around 65. Anything over 70 starts the assault on ears. 70 is likened to a noisy restaurant. And the assault, you know, the noise that's constantly bombarding, if you are in there for 8 hours and you have this assault at 70 or above, there's a possibility you'll sustain some damage. 80 is heavy traffic. Less than 8 hours, you can possibly get some damage. 90 decibels, lawnmower, motorcycle. 2 hours, and you can possibly get some damage. 100 is a chainsaw. Less than 2 hours. You can get some hearing damage. A rock concert, 120 decibels. It is a strong possibility that you will sustain some hearing damage at a rock concert. Now, to illustrate that, if you've ever come out of a rock concert and you feel like you've got earmuffs on your ears and you're having a hard time hearing things, or if it's ringing real loud in your ears, you have probably sustained some damage. A 150 decibels, shotgun blast without protectors. A jet plane. It's not a possibility of immediate hearing damage, it's a probability. And then a rocket launch, it's 180 decibels, you will sustain immediate hearing damage. So, I said, well, what do I do, Doc? And he said, get yourself some ear protectors. He said, simple fix, but it will help you. So, right after that, I really wanted to go to a Cher concert. It was one of her many final tours. And I thought about it, thought what he said. So I got me some ear protectors and put them in my ears. And you know, the first thing I realized, nobody knew I had ear protectors on. And not something else is nobody cared. It was so loud, even with really high protecting ear plugs, it was almost too loud even with them in. And I was a little worried about it. But after the concert, as I was coming out, I took the ear protectors out. I could hear everything perfectly. And I didn't have any ringing. I didn't have any muffled hearing. And the neat thing was, I was listening to everybody else as they were exiting, and they were saying, wow, that was a great concert, but I can't hear a thing. Wow, my head is ringing so bad, I can't even think, but boy, that was a great concert. And I'm sitting there thinking, I enjoyed the concert completely, but I didn't damage my hearing this time. Didn't take that much time to protect my ears, but it's something now that I'm very dedicated to. In fact, I actually had some custom-made ear protectors that fit in my ears, kind of like hearing aids, and you know, it's really, really high protection. But I do that because once that hearing's gone, you can't get it back. Well, I'll tell you how this damage occurs in a couple of minutes, but let's talk about how we hear. Now, this slide is posted on the website. It's under the Unit 2 slides. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you an illustration of an ear, and I'm going to take you through the auditory pathway, okay? Okay. You have a sound wave. The sound wave is caught by the outer ear, which is called the pinna. It funnels that sound wave into the auditory canal. So you've got this sound wave and it's going down the auditory canal. It hits a membrane. Normally we call it the eardrum. The medical name is the tympanic membrane. Tympanic membrane. Now, that is the beginning of the middle ear. So you've got this sound wave, it goes down the auditory canal, it hits the tympanic membrane and it causes it to vibrate. Connected to the tympanic membrane are three bones. Together they're called the ossicles. Individually, the street name, the common name for them, the hammer, the anvil, and the stirrup. The hammer is called the malleus. The stirrup or the stapes, and the anvil is the incus. Now, if you ever take the subject anatomy and physiology, one of the most famous and frequent test questions A&P instructors love, where are the tiniest bones in the body located? It's in the middle ear. Those three bones are the smallest bones in the body. So, you've got sound wave. It comes and vibrates, hits the tympanic membrane, causing the ossicles to vibrate. They are connected to a membrane called the oval window. The oval window is the beginning of the inner ear. Okay? So far we've got the pinna, you've got the sound going the auditory canal, it hits the eardrum, which is the tympanic membrane, causing the eardrum to vibrate. which causes the bones, the ossicles that are connected to the middle ear, or to the eardrum, to vibrate, which causes the oval window to vibrate. Okay? Now, the oval window is connected to a finely wound tube that looks like a snail, and that is called the cochlea. And you can see it kind of looks like a snail. So, you've got the sound wave, it's vibrating, it goes down the auditory canal, it hits the eardrum, it causes the ossicles to vibrate, which causes the oval window to vibrate, which causes the cochlea to vibrate. Cochlea is vibrating. Lining the floor of that cochlea is another membrane called the basilar membrane. When the cochlea starts vibrating, it causes the basilar membrane to vibrate. Okay? So you've got the sound wave, it goes down the auditory canal, causing the eardrum to vibrate, causing the ossicles to vibrate, causing the oval window to vibrate, causing the cochlea to vibrate, causing the basilar membrane to vibrate. Located on top of the basilar membrane is a structure called the organ of Corti. When the basilar membrane is vibrating, it causes the organ of Corti to rise and fall. Okay? Extending from the organ of Corti are little hair cells. These are the nerve cells for the hearing. So you've got sound waves coming, they hit the eardrums vibrate, the ossicles vibrate, the oval window vibrates, the cochlea vibrates, the basilar membrane vibrates, the organ of Corti rises and falls. They have hair cells extending from them, and when they rise, they brush up against another membrane above them called the tectorial membrane. And if the rising and falling is sufficient enough for those hair cells to brush up against them and to bend, then the message continues. So let's see what we've got here. You've got the sound that enters the pinna, goes down the auditory canal, it hits the eardrum, causes the eardrum to vibrate, which causes the ossicles to vibrate, which causes the oval window to vibrate. The oval window sets the fluid, it causes the cochlea to vibrate. The cochlea is filled with a fluid, and as the cochlea is vibrating, it causes the vibration of the basilar membrane. With the basilar membrane vibrating, this causes the organ of Corti to rise and fall. When the organ of Corti rises, hair cells will brush up against the tectorial membrane, and they will bend and depolarize. Sufficient depolarization of the auditory receptors will cause the neurons that synapse with them to fire. So, if these hair cells brush up with enough, I don't want to say force, but if they have enough rising and falling to cause them to bend, that can cause depolarization, and then you've got the neurons that synapse with these auditory receptors, and that causes that neuron to fire. Okay, the neurons of these neurons come together and they form what's called the auditory nerve. They come together before they leave the cochlea and they form the auditory nerve. The message now travels down that auditory nerve into higher brain centers. The message will then go to the medulla, where some of the fibers are going to cross to the opposite hemisphere. The remaining fibers are going to go to the thalamus, and then the message is going to go to the temporal lobes. So, what we've got, you've got the sound, it comes down, auditory canal, hits the eardrum, causing the eardrum to vibrate, causing the ossicles to vibrate, causing the oval window to vibrate, causing the cochlea to vibrate, causing the fluid within the cochlea to vibrate, causing the basilar membrane to rise and fall. Causing the basilar membrane to vibrate, which causes the organa corti to rise and fall, which causes the hairs on the organa corti to rise and fall. They brush up against the tectoral membrane. It causes a depolarization of the neurons that synapse with these auditory receptors. Now the message is going to go down these neurons. Their axons come together, forming the auditory nerve. That message now travels down the auditory nerve, goes to the medulla, goes from the medulla, it's going to go to the thalamus. From the thalamus, it's going to go to the temporal membrane, temporal lobes, all in a fraction of a second. To me, that's astounding. All that happens. All that happens in a fraction of a second. Now, I told you I was going to tell you how this loud noises affect the hearing. These are the hair cells. These are the hair cells that are on the organa corti. Now, the organa corti rises and falls, the hair cells rise and fall, and if they have sufficient force, they will bend, and depolarization takes place, and the neuron fires. If you have a loud enough noise, they don't just rise and fall and bend and cause depolarization. They slam up against that tectoral membrane and then break off. When they break off, there's no repairing them. You do not, the body does not repair these hair cells once they are damaged. So, putting it this way, you've got hair cells, and they'll brush up against the tectoral membrane like that. But if you've got them that's broken off, they can't touch it, so therefore these neurons are not getting the message. The message is there, but there's nothing to transmit it. So, I'm not going to tell you, I know this one way or the other, but I had one of my students ask me about this, and something looks like trash over here. Looks like some trash other places. Looks like, and those all look like fully mature hair cells. The question is, what happened to these? And is this trash or what? I don't know, but I think it's a possibility those are two that have broken off. Once they're gone, those are two that cannot function like they were made to. So therefore, they cannot touch the tectoral membrane, they cannot transmit the information they have, the message stays right there. Now, I once had a student, and she said, my boyfriend has one of these, I guess, woofers in the back trunk of the car, and she says he gets his son on the weekend, and he puts him in the car seat, in the back seat, but he'll go ahead and rev up that sound. She goes, is this bad for the child? And I said, well, let me put it like this. If I knew his name and I knew his address, I'd report him scam. He's damaging that child's hearing before the child even has any say-so whatsoever. It's cruel. He's taking away this kid's hearing. And child doesn't know it. And it's going to be a problem in the future. But you can see now why I think we're going to have several generations of deaf people in the very near future. Because what do? You get in the car and you crank up the volume. You pump up the volume. I've got to feel the music. I did too. But you know something? I'd rather have a little less feeling of the music and keep my hearing a little longer. Now, in the past, you didn't know. Now, whenever you go to a concert without hearing protectors, whenever you pump up the volume, whenever you assault your ears, you do it with knowledge that you are taking one step toward damaging your hearing. So now you're doing it with full knowledge. And it's a choice rather than an accident. So all I do is just say, please think about it. There are several hearing theories, how we hear sounds. Especially high and low tones. One is called the place theory. And this one says that we hear high and low tones simply from the place that's vibrating on the basilar membrane. The location that's vibrating on the basilar membrane. And so one part could produce high tones, another part could produce another location, low tones. Okay? The place theory. Easy to remember. It's a place where it's vibrating, causing the tone. The frequency theory says that no, it's not the place, it's how fast the vibrating is occurring on the basilar membrane. So if it's vibrating extremely fast, that'd be a high tone. If it's vibrating extremely slow, that'd be a lower tone. Now, they're actually talking about combining the two theories to explain how we hear things. That makes more sense to me than anything. Okay? There are 3 types of deafness. We've already talked about sensory neural deafness. This is deafness caused by nerve damage to the inner ear, particularly the hair cells. Sensory neural deafness is nerve deafness, nerve damage to the inner ear, especially hair cells. Then we have conduction deafness. Conduction deafness is caused by a blockage or obstruction of the middle ear, especially those three bones called the ossicles. Now, one of the most common causes of conduction deafness is the collection of earwax. Moms are phenomenal people. They are God's gift to this world. But I wish that moms would quit telling and teaching their kids to clean out their ears with Q-tips. This is not what you're supposed to do. When you use a Q-tip, you are using it as a battering ram and pushing that wax farther down the auditory canal, pushing it against the eardrum. It will stay there and then harden. Then you come along and push some more wax, and it stays there and hardens, and push some more wax, it stays there and hardens until it will form a clod. And a doctor will have to remove that, and it's quite painful. It can be very painful. We're going to watch a clod of hardened wax being removed from a person's ear. When it keeps being pushed back and pushed back, it will become hard as a rock. Normally they have to get under part of it and chip it away until they can get a good hold on it, and then they'll start taking big chunks out. I've worked for an
ear doctor for a little while. It's amazing how painful that is. People just do not like it at all. That's the eardrum. And let's go for the other side.
So is he able to hear?
He'll be able to hear a lot better after this. Yes, he can hear some, but it's muffled. And that's why they're talking about conduction deafness. You can get more and more in that, and it reduces the hearing more and more. Part of those flakes are dead skin, and part of them are the wax. Pretty good chunks. Doctors do not want you to use bobby pins to clean your ears out. They don't want you to use Q-tips. They don't want you to use paper clips. Of course, not hairpins, but I've heard of people using hairpins. Basically, the ear doctors will say anything smaller than an elbow should not be put in your ear. Now, how do you clean out your ears? Some of the doctors will tell you to use hydrogen peroxide. Put a little bit of hydrogen peroxide in your ear, let it bubble, and then you can take a towel and kind of wipe it out, and then you can take another little cotton and just kind of with some water and clean it out. That'll boil that wax out, and that'll be very good. The best, though, is to go to a pharmacy and ask them for an earwax removal kit. And the doctors love it when you do that. It comes with a little bottle of liquid. You put a couple of drops of liquid in your ears. It'll basically liquefy the wax that you've got. And it's got a little bulb, like a little infant's bulb. And you take that and squeeze it and then put it in your ear, and it'll suck the wax right out. It's perfectly safe, cleans your ear, and doctors are happy, you're happy, everybody's happy, all's well in the world. I do not recommend an earwax candle. A lot of people will, they used to ask me about this all the time. Well, what about an earwax candle? And, oh, I don't have my mask on. The way this works, they've got a piece of parchment, and it's rolled up into like a little funnel or cone, and you put that, the small end in your ear,
and then the top end, you light it. I kept being asked about this, and I finally thought, okay, I'm gonna bite the bullet, I'm gonna see what it's all about. So my husband and I went out and bought one, and the first thing it says is to get a paper plate or an aluminum pie pan, put a hole in it so that you can put the candle through that hole and then insert it in the ear so that if any flaming parts come off of the candle, it will not catch your clothes on fire. That's a little bit of a red flag right there to me. So we did that. Another thing that kind of bothered me was having something flammable right by my ear, or right by my hair. I put it in, and the theory is as it burns, it forms a suction in this cone, which pulls out the wax. Well, the pressure that I felt on the suction was very uncomfortable, and I thought it could very well actually rupture the eardrum. It was so stout. And so, in the interest of science, I conducted that experiment, and in all honesty, I cannot recommend anybody use a earwax candle to clean out their ears. Now, one of the instructors here, her daughter did an earwax candle experiment, and she lit one of the earwax candles and put it in somebody's ear, and then you can unwind it and you can see the wax that's been collected in the bottom of that cone. Well, she did that and she saw the wax, then she just lit one without inserting it in anybody's ear, and the same residue was at the bottom. And so her conclusion was that it really doesn't work, that you're going to get the same residue whether you use it in your ear or just light it. So in all honesty, I cannot tell you anything positive, but I'm not an authority on it, and I can only tell you by my experience. And my experience was, I won't do it again. Okay? Central deafness. This is deafness caused by disease or tumors in the auditory pathway or in the auditory cortex. Also, this is deafness that can be caused by childhood diseases like measles, I think mumps. There's several childhood diseases that you can contract that can cause deafness because of that. Now, I took American Sign Language one time, and my instructor was deaf. And it was interesting because when she introduced herself, she said that she had been born with hearing. But when she was 1 year of age, she got a real bad virus, and the doctor misprescribed medication. They gave the child medication in good faith, and this particular medication combined with the virus destroyed 90% of her hearing. And so she was deaf for the rest of her life from a virus, again, mixed with this particular medication. And so that would be considered central deafness. Okay? Any questions about any of that? And I think that's the end of the auditory. Yeah. So on Tuesday, we'll start talking about vision. That won't take long, so we'll talk about the sense of smell, and we may even get into the sense of taste. So, does anybody have any questions about anything? Any comments? Anything preying on their mind? Was that something you were going to ask? How about any criticisms? Anything that I need to change? Well, don't forget to finish up your Unit 2 biology exam by Sunday night. And with that said, y'all can go ahead, have a great weekend, enjoy yourselves,